One of the best aspects of Monster Hunter is the sheer variety of ways to play the game. This is all thanks to the various weapons and sheer amount of builds or sets that you can create. So I'm Darcblade with an Anti-Alatreon build for the Greatsword in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now the main purpose of an anti-build is to create a set that is made to counter a specific monster in the game. In this episode we're looking at countering Alatreon, providing hunters with two builds to take on the Blazing Black Dragon. One safe, one risky. The Greatsword is one of the weapons that benefits least from elemental weapons, but nonetheless with the right setup and builds, even the Greatsword can easily power down Alatreon and allow you to finish the hunt. So the first build I use is the risky Anti-Alatreon Greatsword build. This build, much like all the other risky builds featured in this little mini-series, features the full Safi'jiiva armor set to provide us a ton of skills that enhance our elemental damage output, but comes with the risk of draining our health. So for this build you'll need the Safi Crested Crown Beta, the Safi Crested Chest Alpha, the Safi Crested Vambraces Beta, Safi Crested Belt Beta, and the Safi Crested Boots Beta. I'm also using a Blaze Charm 5 as we're using a fire weapon, and for my weapon I'm using the Kiar Fellsword King. This has a health regen augmentation, an elemental up augmentation, and for the custom upgrades I've gone for simply increasing the weapon's elemental rating. Of course, if you wanted to use a different element, you can simply swap out the Blaze Charm and weapon for a different weapon that has a different element. As for the specialist tools, these are down to personal preference. As for the jewels, first of all I've gone for a Blaze Jewel to max out the fire attack of this build. Of course, if you were using a different element, you would replace the Blaze Jewel to match whatever new element you are using. I've then gone for Vitality Jewels for health boost, Charger Jewels for the focus skill, Tenderizer Jewels for weakness exploit, Evasion Jewel to max out the evade window skill, this is kind of optional in all honesty, Attack Jewels for the attack boost skill, and a Sharp Jewel for protective polish. As for the jewels on the mantles, these are down to personal preference, but I've gone for maintenance and protection jewels. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunter taking all your relevant consumables. You'll have a raw attack of 1517 with white sharpness. You'll have 65% base affinity. This stat includes the true Dragon Vein Awakening buff. This can easily be 100% so long as you're tenderizing monster weak points, and these are the main focus of your attacks. You have an elemental fire rating of 940 with a decent defense of 1081 that is strong against every element except for dragon. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you have fire attack at level 6, increasing the fire rating and damage of this build. You'll then have attack boost at level 5. Attack boost is a skill that increases the raw attack portion of our build, and at level 4 or above it also provides us an extra bonus 5% affinity. Even though this is an elemental greatsword build, the greatsword still strongly benefits from raw attack skills as the weapon hits so slowly. Anyway, you have Evade Window level 5, a wonderful defensive and quality of life skill. Evade Window gives us increased invincibility when we perform evades and dodges, which adds to our survivability as we can pretty much roll through any of Alatreon's attacks, bar its ultimate. Anyway, you have Health Boost level 3, increasing our maximum health to that potential 200. You have Blight Resistance level 3, allowing us to ignore all elemental blights, very handy when it comes to taking on Alatreon. You have Critical Boost level 3. Critical Boost is a skill that increases our damage when our attacks crit a monster, but this only applies to the raw portion of an attack. But it is very useful for the Greatsword, as the Greatswords have very high raw attack built into them normally. But it should be noted that Critical Boost does nothing to the elemental portion of our attack. Anyway, you have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that increases our affinity when we're attacking monster weak points. And should these weak points be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first, this increase to our affinity is even greater. Weakness Exploit at level 3 can potentially provide us an extra 50% affinity. Anyway, you have Focus level 3. Focus is a decent skill for the Greatsword as it allows us to charge up our charging attacks more quickly. You have Protective Polish level 1, allowing us to put a protective coating over our sharpness gauge, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time after we sharpen our weapon, so it helps keep that white sharpness for a longer period. You have Critical Element level 1, which is like Critical Boost but for the elemental portion of our attacks. So when our attacks crit a monster, the elemental damage will be increased. And finally, when you're wearing your mantles, you have Divine Blessing at level 1, giving us a chance at taking reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster, and you'll have Tool Specialist level 2, reducing the cooldown on our specialist tools. Finally, for the set bonus, you have the Safi'jiiva Seal, True Dragon Vein Awakening. This is a buff that kicks in when we have our weapon drawn. When your weapon is out, you'll gain an increase of 40% base affinity, as well as an extra 150 elemental rating. It would also provide an extra 120 ailment rating if you were using an ailment weapon. But there is a downside to all this, as with each swing of the weapon, you will drain a portion of your health, leaving a red portion of health on your health bar. So if this red health builds up and you take a hit, there's a high chance of you carting. But should you not take a hit and continuously attack a monster, after a certain amount of hits, you'll be healed for the health that the True Dragonbane Awakening drained from you. So there's a real risk-reward factor there. This health drain can be slightly countered with the health regen augmentation though. But that is the risky Greatsword Anti-Alatreon build I'd recommend. But of course every build out there has pros and cons. Much like the other risky builds in this series, the biggest pro for this build is its high elemental damage. But with the Greatsword it also has high raw damage as well, and this combined together means that you should be able to easily power down Alatreon and finish the hunt. On top of that, this build comes with a few quality of life skills that benefit the Greatsword, including Focus, Health Boost, Blight Resistance, Evade Window and more. And the final pro is the True Dragonbane Awakening set, providing you a ton of DPS buffs, adding to your overall DPS. But unfortunately this build has cons. The two biggest cons with this build are, of course, as always when you're using the Safi set, the health drain aspect of True Dragonbane Awakening, which can leave you at risk of fainting. And the other con is, again, as we are using a Kiar weapon, we sometimes have sharpness issues with this build. But regardless, using this build you're normally able to power down the monster at least once per phase and finish the hunt quite effectively. If you're having trouble powering down Alatreon, maybe go for the legs first before focusing on the head. That way you're normally able to finish the hunt quite effectively with the Greatsword. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the safe Anti-Alatreon Greatsword build. This build is another strong elemental focused Greatsword build that is quite easy to craft and doesn't come with the downside of draining your health, making it slightly more comfortable to use. We're also going to be making use of the Frostcraft set bonus found on the Velkhana armour, as because Alatreon moves around so much, it means that we're going to be sheathing the weapon quite often, allowing for the Frostcraft buff to replenish itself quite often. So for this build you'll need the Rimeguard Helm Beta, Rimeguard Mel Beta, Rimeguard Vambraces Beta, Rimeguard Coil Beta and the Brachydium Greaves Beta. I'm also using a Frost Charm 5 as we're going to be using an ice weapon, and for my weapon I'm using the Safi Frost Splitter. This has a health regen augmentation and elemental up augmentation. As for the awakened abilities on it, I've simply gone for some sharpness increases as well as elemental up abilities as well. Of course you can use a different element if you want, and if you do so, remember to also swap out the Frost Charm to match whatever new element you are using. And as for the specialist tools, as always, these are down to personal preference. So when it comes to the jewels, you've got a fair few to play around with. Firstly, I've gone for Charger Jewels for the focus skill, Vitality Jewels for health boost, a Frost Jewel to max out the ice attack. Of course, if you were using a different element, you would replace the Frost Jewel to match whatever new element you were using. I've then gone for Expert Jewels for some critical eye, and Resistor Jewels for the blight resistance skill. As for the jewels on our mantles, again I've gone for maintenance and protection jewels. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which would be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have a raw attack of 1368 with a little bit of purple sharpness. You have 35% base affinity, which can be 85% when you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. It would have been nice to get this higher, and if we didn't need blight resistance, this would easily be 100%, but with this build I feel more comfortable with blight resistance. You have an ice elemental rating of 830 with an OK defense of 1007. That is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you have ice attack at level 6. Ice attack increases the ice rating and damage of this build. Of course, if you were using a different element, you would replace this to match whatever new element you wanted to use. You have critical eye at level 6, increasing the base affinity of this build. You have health boost level 3, blight resistance level 3, weakness exploit level 3, focus level 3, quick sheath level 3. Quick sheath is a skill that allows us to sheath and put away our weapon more quickly. Very handy for the greatsword, especially when Alatreon moves away from you. You have divine blessing level 2, which can be level 3 when we're wearing our mantles. In fact, there is a little bit of a mistake on this build. The Rocksteady mantle that has 2 protection jewels in it, it only needs 1. So in the Rocksteady mantle you actually have an additional jewel to play around with if you wish. Anyway, you have flinch free level 2, which allows us to ignore minor monster attacks and knockbacks from allies as well. And you have tool specialist level 2 when you're wearing your mantles. Finally, for the set bonus, you have 2 of them, both attached to the Velkhana divinity. First of all, for wearing 2 pieces of the armor, you'll have critical element. This is also found on the Kiar weapons. Critical element basically increases the elemental portion of our attacks when our attacks crit a monster. And then finally, for wearing 4 pieces of the armor, you'll have the Frostcraft ability. Frostcraft is a skill that allows us to build an aura of frost around our weapon when it's sheathed, raising the weapon's attack. But with each swing of the weapon, this bonus will drain and become weaker and weaker until we sheathe the weapon and let it recharge itself. and this combined with quick sheath and how the Alatreon fight works, i.e. the monster moving around so much, it means that we can really benefit from the Frostcraft skill. But there we have it, that's the safe Anti-Alatreon build I'd recommend for the Greatsword. But even this comes with pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its decent damage output, thanks to a combination of ice attack, affinity skills, and of course the Frostcraft skill. On top of that, this is a build that has quite a few quality of life skills, from health boost, blight resistance to focus and quick sheath. These can all make hunts feel slightly more easier. And the final pro, which is not really more of a statistical pro per se, but the armor set looks damn awesome. But of course there are cons. The biggest cons with this build include the fact that we don't have a 100% affinity, and whilst this isn't an issue when you're using this build against other monsters, it's nonetheless something to be aware of. And the other con is unfortunately we only have a small portion of purple sharpness. In all honesty, you could, if you wanted to, drop the sharpness awakened abilities on the Safi Frost Splitter for more elemental up awakened abilities, but as always the choice is down to you. But regardless, this is a fairly safe build to take on Alatreon with. It has defensive skills and offensive skills, it doesn't have a health drain, and is still able to power down the monster quite effectively, so long as you're capitalising on the Frostcraft skill. So there we have it, those are two builds I can recommend for taking on an Alatreon with the Greatsword. Now of course, as you farm the monster more and more, you will get Alatreon gear and weaponry, which will allow you to take on the hunt a little bit more easily, as they have very high elemental damage ratings and defences. But until then, these builds will work just fine. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you Anti-Alatreon builds for the Greatsword in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.